At the age of 25, I was the youngest ever first-star general to have 4 stars on both my shoulders. Every star on my shoulder represented a life that I had taken.
The cost of his leadership was high, and Welcome began to think that it might be time for him to step down.
You need to ask for permission from the head of prison to get 4 other generals from 4 other prisons to come and listen to your exit. I remember sitting in that space and having to face these 4 generals.
But is it really possible to leave the gang?
It's toxic as hell to be a leader in prison. Of the 23 years, I served 14 years. Of the 14 years, I stepped up to become a general with 28s for 7. And my journey to becoming a general was quite interesting because I remember there was this correctional officer in prison that I was very good friends with, Mr. Jones, and he used to bring me sugar. And I remember that day when I made the decision to actually stab a correctional officer, I was called in and I was given a knife. For 8 days, they had to train me where and how to stab. I mean, you can't just go out there and stab a correctional officer without knowing where the main arteries are and how. And then I step out and then I walk up to Mr. Jones. But while walking up to Mr. Jones, there's 2 other offenders that are with me, and they are known as the Draad and Glas. And as you stab the correctional officer, their other job is also simple. They've got 2 responsibilities. The first one is to stab you if you refuse to stab the correctional officer. So they've got knives to kill you if you choose not to kill. Second is to protect you. Is that when you stab the correctional officer, they need to take the knife. You throw the knife to the back, they pick it up and they move away with the knife so that there's no weapon. So when you get arrested or caught on the scene or there, they have to look for a knife because the correctional officer was stabbed with something. So if there's no weapon, you don't get an added sentence. So it's either you go through with it or they go through with you. And I remember that evening as if it was yesterday, having to stand there and having to watch Mr. Jones falling and bleeding. A part of me wanted to help him, but I couldn't because I realized that at that moment I needed to establish myself as a genuine leader that could do what they wanted me to do. And that is how I got my first star on my shoulder. And I went on because every star on my shoulder represented a life that I had taken. So by the age of 21, I had 3 stars on both my shoulders. At the age of 25, I was the youngest ever first-star general to have 4 stars on both my shoulders. And that's how I became the general of the 28s. Interestingly, my grandmother used to come and visit me. She was the only person that came to visit me in prison. The friends that said they'll come, they never came. The people said that cared about me never came, so it was just my grandmother. And every time my grandmother came to me, she used to tell me that they are praying for me, that they are hoping for the best. She used to say that she does not know what I'm going through in here, but she has hope that I'll come out a better person. And I used to look at her and think, I don't understand. I don't know whether you understand what am I doing and whether this better person that you're expecting, how do you want this person to show up? I was thinking about those things. I was sitting in the courtyard and there was 2 men sitting in front of me and they were having a conversation. And these men were talking about raping. They were talking about killing and they were laughing about it. And I suddenly thought to myself that if I were to be a father one day, what kind of father am I going to be? Especially to a girl child. How am I going to show up as a father? How am I going to be able to protect my daughter against these men like me? That was the decision that I decided on that day, that I couldn't live this life anymore. I can't be this man that prison wanted me to be. And that is when I decided that I'm going to change my life completely and walk away from all of this and choose a different path. I think what I can say is that most of my friends that I had before I went to prison were predominantly in the gangs, in the street gangs. The men that I left behind when I went to prison, most of them got involved in drugs, most of them died. I can say one thing about my life, if I think about it, is that prison actually saved my life. If it wasn't for me going to prison, I would not have become the man that I am today. But because I had gone to prison, my life changed for the better. I was able to renounce a lot of my friends and just focus on family and focus on my change and focus on the man that I've become. It hasn't been all bad, because there's a code in the number that says once a man steps out of the numbers gang in the right way, then there is honor and respect for that man. I followed due process when I left the number. There's a lot of dangers outside of prison, but it's how you choose to live your life that keeps you away from that danger. Being a man of integrity, being associated with people that see your vision, that understand the changes that you want to bring to the world, like the work that I'm doing today, is to always warn young people against joining street gangs, against joining criminal syndicates, against prostitution, against drugs. That's my purpose, that's my mission. The process of leaving the numbers gang is that the higher up you are in the gang, the more you are in a position to write the systems that are within, because in general, you have access to the book, you have access to what the number entails, and you can write within the number your exit. And the exit for a general is very simple. You need to ask for permission from the head of prison to get 4 other generals from 4 other prisons to come and listen to your exit. Those 4 generals from 4 other prisons are called the council. When those men come to the prison, obviously the prison has to clear a cell so that those men can sleep there, because it depends on how long the procedure is going to be. I mean, asking for permission to get these 4 generals from 4 other prisons to come to your prison to hear your exit, it's the responsibility of the head of prison, the responsibility of the area commissioner, and the Minister of Correctional Services. They need to sign off on a trip sheet that's going to bring these 4 generals to that prison. It's mandatory that he signs it off. You wouldn't want your correctional officers to be stabbed every single day because you don't want to adhere to one request. So prison has its own rules, its own set. So as these 4 men are transported to the prison that I'm at, they would have to then sit and listen to my side of the story. And I can't enter into their council wearing any clothes because I might be concealing a knife. So I have to enter into that circle completely naked, and I have to state the reason as to why I want them to retire me from the number. They will try to convince me to stay, but I remember sitting in that space and having to face these 4 generals. Now remember, the 2 generals standing in front of me are the judges. They are the ones listening to my story and to why I want to leave the number. The 2 generals at the back are known as the executioners. They are the Draad and Glas. Again, what happened, it's happening again. So their job is to listen and to see, but they also are the only ones that have knives. If these 2 judges in front do not agree with my story, they do not believe that what I'm saying is evident and truthful enough, these men behind me will stab me. I'll bleed out for 5 minutes. Interestingly enough, if that were to have happened, so I would be laying on that floor, bleed, and within 5 minutes I'm dead. But something interesting happens in prison as I lay there dying. There will be a notification or announcement made to the rest of the prison to say that a general has fallen. For 8 days, the prison will be on lockdown. They will sing songs about me. They will talk about wonders I've done in prison. They will celebrate me. For 8 days, that will happen. And after the 8 days, a new general will take my position. Now imagine your life's legacy being 8 days long. When I told them why I don't want to be in the gang anymore, I remember them asking me to step back and giving them a moment to consider my request. And then one of the generals said, "Welcome, do you remember 6 years ago at Drakensberg prison, I could not read, I could not write. You came into the cell and you saw me struggling with this piece of paper that I had received from the warder, which was a letter from my family. You sat down and you read it to me. You just didn't read it to me. You also asked me, would you want to read in the future?" And I said yes. It took you 3 months to teach me to read and write. Because of you, I can read today. Now remember, this incident happened 6 years ago. I did not know that that very same gentleman that I was helping in that cell 6 years ago would become a man, a general, in the position of making a choice over my life. The only thing that will save your life is one act of kindness. And that was my exit from the number. One act of kindness. You know, when I left the number while in prison, it was a bit tough because, you know, once a general, you always knew what was going on. When something happens in prison, you were the first one to know because you probably ordered it. And now you no longer had that power, you no longer had that ear of knowing. I just simply went to the head of prison and I said, listen, I'm out. I did correspondence learning through UNISA, where I did my education qualification studying ABET, which is Adult Basic Education and Training. Have one of the cells and start teaching offenders. And I actually just started a little school. And then the school got a bit bigger, you know, it's like from 3 offenders to 6, from 6 to 17. End of the day, I had a whole classroom. So now I was teaching, and I asked other offenders to also join the bursary program and started to become ABET educators, and that's how we started a school in prison. When you talk about it not being easy, it wasn't easy to not know what's going on, but I had a lot to focus on. I had the school going. I was also putting my life together on the outside. Remember, while being in prison, I lost my mom in 2001. I lost my dad in 2004. So I literally had so much of my own life that I had to put together, and I had to build a relationship with my remaining family. So I wasn't really fazed by not knowing what's going on, but it was safe, because whether you leave the number, you can't remove the tattoos on your shoulder. They will always respect your rank. No matter whether I couldn't command them anymore, but they still respected the blood that flowed from this. And that is the loyalty and honor of the number. It's the fact that instead of being the creator of problems or the instigator or the troublemaker, I now became something else. I became a hope giver, I became a teacher, I became voice of reason. And that aided me in saying, he's actually behaving well. Let's send him home earlier, 14 years. And I was then given parole and sent home on good behavior. So my first day out of prison was, you know, everything that you miss about the outside. And quite interestingly enough is that when I left prison and we were driving en route to corrections, and the best part of being out of prison was the fact that I could now eat whatever I wanted to eat, and I so much missed pizza. Interestingly enough is that as we were going around, we were looking for this place called St. Elmo's. And I said to this lady, we're looking for this place called St. Elmo's. And she says, bruh, where have you been? St. Elmo's no longer exists. It was that excitement of coming out of prison, the food, the environment, the people. But when you come out of prison, everything outside is so small. You know, because you were in this big building that was completely gray, cold. It was like a concrete jungle. There was no grass, there was nothing. And now you are stepping out and you see the birds, you see the roads, you see the people, you see everything. And it was so amazing to see all of those things. I think the thing that also intrigued me is that when I got home, I had most of these gangs, the street gang that I used to belong to. These men came to my house with, you know, cars, drugs, women. They were like, welcome, you're out, you know, we see you and we salute you, because they kind of thought they could get me back into the game. And I had to like look at them and say, guys, I'm sorry, but I need to be with family, bye-bye. You know, it was a tough decision to make, because the money that they were showing, the drugs that they were, I knew that the next day when I wake up, I don't have a job, I don't have money, you know. So I kind of like didn't know what was going to happen. The next day, I woke up very early in the morning because prison was still in me. I literally waited to get food, and my grandmother said, bruh, you are old enough to make your own food. And I was like, okay, I'm outside, I'm no longer in prison. Waking up in the morning after that, going to look for a job, I remember there's one interview I did in Cape Town where I was welcomed so nicely. I mean, I had a shirt on, a tie, I was dressed nicely, and then this lady gave me a bottled water, she made me coffee. It was so nice. I was treated with so much respect. It was really, really good. I entered the interview room, they sat there, they started talking to me, they went through my CV, they saw 14-year gap, and they asked, okay, we see that you were at the School of Excellence, because prison is no longer called prison, it was now called Goodwood Center of Excellence. So you see you were at the Center of Excellence, but you had many centers of excellence. So tell us about that. And then there was a phone number there. So the guy called this lady that was sitting there and whispered something into her ear. She left, and then just a few minutes later she came back and she whispered something in his ear. And then I saw the bottled water being taken. I saw a guy coming in to escort me out of the building, and the guy said to us, to me predominantly, don't call us, we'll call you. That's how I started to understand the stigma that was attached to coming out of prison. That's how I got to understand how businesses treated people like us. And I remember the only organization that really gave me an opportunity was Sonke Gender Justice Network, where I was able to then work there, presented them with my qualifications, and they started this prisons program. And they said, can you please work on it? And that's how I got my first employment. But it was tough, it was difficult, it wasn't easy. Having to cover my tattoos all the time, not wanting people to see me for who I was, constantly wearing a suit, constantly wearing a tie, because I didn't want people to judge me, until I realized that I can only be who I am. And I started wearing my vests again, I started wearing my t-shirts again, because I could no longer live according to my past, and I could not allow my past to hold me captive. But coming out of prison was amazing. Being outside is amazing, being free is amazing, but it's a lot of responsibility. I think from there, for me, was also the important part of starting BrightSpark Foundation SA, which today is a beacon of hope for many young people. The actual reason why I started BrightSpark Foundation South Africa was to give young people an opportunity at making better life choices, giving them an opportunity that I wasn't given, and also giving them a way out of joining the gangs or being part of criminal syndicates or falling into the traps of human trafficking or prostitution, and in place of having to make all of those negative choices, that they would choose education. So our main objective is to work with vulnerable young people caught in gangs, vulnerable young people that are at risk to become part of gangs or to do wrong things and end up in prison. Sometimes it's easier to say to a gangster, stop being in the gangs, but what's the substitute? So BrightSpark Foundation SA is the substitute. We also provide vulnerable families with food parcels. We believe that each family needs a start. We can't expect people to leave something, because many of the kids that join these gangs do not have food at home. There's little things that they struggle with, so our objective is to replace those little things that they struggle with, so that they do not become susceptible to the calling cards of gang leaders. A young boy called Ryan, who's currently working, and he was on the streets selling marijuana, selling dacha, and he joined the program. And as he joined the program, we looked at what he is good at. He was good at music. We got him involved in making music, making beats. Also another boy that's working in security today. We've got many girls that were involved in various activities that are working for companies such as Metso, working for companies like, as I said, Henley Business School. So that type of relationship, saying how do we get young people out of that environment and giving them an opportunity, a fair chance at making better life choices.